This meeting is being recorded.
Hey, hey. Happy Wednesday.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Neil. How are you?
Not bad. Doing okay. Could be better.
Could be worse.
It could be worse. It could be worse. That's true.
We got to catch up. It's been a while.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Happy to actually. Are you traveling over the holidays or are you around or?
I am traveling briefly, uh, going up to Marin for like 3 days, and then I'm coming back down on Christmas to hopefully close on the house the next day.
Congrats. That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Are you, when you're up here in Marin, are you just occupied the whole time with like family travel, like fun stuff or, what's your schedule like when you're up here?
It's a short stint, but I don't have any plans. I mean, the 20, I get up the 21st, and I have one holiday party then, and then 22nd, 23rd, pretty empty. So maybe,
Okay.
yeah, maybe we can do
Yeah, let me think about it. My family is leaving to visit my in-laws. I am not going with them on the 24th. And so I maybe and we have a busy weekend. I think it sounds like you're coming up for a weekend, and so we're kind of busy that weekend, but I might be able to meet up with you Monday. But if not, honestly, let's just do something over Zoom after you close on your
yeah,
house. Um,
cool.
and you have, you know, less stuff on your mind and maybe work is a little bit slower because we're in between Christmas, New Year's and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, we'll make something happen one way or another.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna get this presentation rolling. Um, no, don't want to do that. We'll get started in a little bit. I think some people will be rolling in for the next couple of minutes. Not quite the view I wanted, but let's see if I can make this better. Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear whoever is asking.
That's Sheila.
All right.
I'm Sheila. I'm from
Hey, Sheila.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. Doing well. About to kick things off in a second.
Is my camera not working?
All right. Can everyone see this screen, I guess? Is this being shared properly? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me change. And when I change, it's changing, right? No?
Just seeing the first slide now.
Great. I'm sharing the wrong screen. We're gonna get there, I promise. I don't know why this is giving me such a hard time. Share. And I want to share. Okay, we're just gonna do this one. Now it's working, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. We're 4 minutes underway, so I'm gonna get this thing kicked off. Thanks for joining, everybody. This is designed to be a community conversation, obviously led in a structured way. We're gonna be rolling through some slides, but obviously we want a lot of participation as well. That's what makes the community so great. The goal really is to discuss for many folks who have not taken a sort of like a structured approach to tracking and evaluating their firm metrics and the health of their firm using metrics. This is like ground zero. Let's get the ball rolling and see if we can start that behavior, and hopefully it accumulates into better behavior and figuring out how to improve on an iterative basis the health of your firm and the goals that you want to achieve as we roll into 2025. So Catherine Enck is here with us. She ran Hire and Esquire for a long period of time. They were acquired by Major Lindsey in Africa, and she now is director over there, still running that line of business. Is very knowledgeable on metrics as a topic area, and I just enjoy learning from her. So we invited her on to talk about this. So Catherine, do you want to go ahead and do your own intro, and then we can roll into this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me, Brian. I'm looking forward to talking about this. As Brian said, I was the COO for Hire and Esquire, which is a legal hiring platform. We were the first to come to market. So we were the first, sort of legal job board / staffing / recruiting digital option. We have a large platform and network full of all kinds of attorneys and legal professionals, paralegals, contracts managers, all that. And we're all over the US. And 2 years ago, we were acquired by Major Lindsey in Africa. So I was the COO before we were acquired. Now I'm an executive director, but I still basically run the business, which is kind of standalone from the other business lines at MLA. And a big part of what we did when we were still running Hire and Esquire ourselves before the acquisition, we were investor backed. So we had to do a lot of, quarterly presentations, fundraising presentations, and all of that. My business partner, who was the CEO, Julia Shapiro, she lived in Silicon Valley specifically so that we could fundraise. So metrics were an incredibly important part of all of that. VCs want to hear specific metrics. They want to talk about metrics. And so that was really a big portion of what we were looking at all the time. And so I actually have grown to really enjoy metrics. I think it's like a little bit of a Stockholm syndrome situation. Didn't start out that way, but I do actually really enjoy it now. So looking forward to speaking with you all about it. And just a little context, I have a lot of experience working with small and solo law firms because that is who our primary client base is. But I don't have the perspective of putting metrics together from your seat, which is actually running your own practice. And so I'm sort of hoping that between our different, perspectives and vantage points, that there can be some really interesting conversations that come out of this. Awesome. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why you should care about metrics, because it can feel burdensome and annoying to have to track different things and figure out how to get clean data, figure out how to look at it in a way that's actually going to be helpful to you. So just really briefly, metrics are really helpful as a diagnostic tool. So sometimes you can start to figure out if you have a sales funnel, depending on the kind of practice you have and the way that you're tracking new matters or clients that are coming in. You may find that once you start tracking referrals or opportunities that come in, you might start to see how many of those actually close, right? And how many of those you actually end up with a paying client for. And that can be really helpful for you to start to diagnose, well, is there a problem with my intake process? Is there a problem with, you know, my reception, or if you're outsourcing any of that, and what can you do to improve that? Because you may find that there are opportunities to improve things like that. The other thing that might be helpful is trend spotting. So if you have the kind of practice where you're practicing a lot in a lot of different practice areas, if you're tracking it a little bit more closely, for example, you might find, oh yeah, I can start to anticipate that from this time to this time of the year, I'm going to be hearing a lot from these types of clients. And then you can make adjustments to either how you're staffing up, or if you need help, or if you need fewer resources during that time. So trend spotting is really helpful. And then just as an evaluation tool to sort of help you run experiments and figure out new social strategies, marketing strategies, or you know, all kinds of things that can help you sort of experiment and know if things are successful or if they're not.
Yeah, and I just want to add to some of the terms and like the concepts that we're talking about, because they can seem like we're talking about businesses that are much larger and mature than yours, but in reality they're not. So when we say like sales funnel, it sounds big and professional, but it literally, if you're posting on LinkedIn and you get a like from somebody who could be a potential client, that is somebody in your funnel. Like that's somebody who you should say, oh, I got 10 likes on this post, 3 of those are potential clients. Maybe I should follow up with them. That's a signal that at least they read what you saw, and there's a reason they saw it. So just little things like that. Anyone you have a conversation with, anyone you met at a networking event, that's the top of your sales funnel. And if you start to view every interaction like that, you start to realize there's a lot more data than you otherwise thought. Like we don't all have pretty dashboards, right? And we don't have all people coming, you know, thousands of impressions on our website, but we do have a funnel. So I guess think about how all this stuff interplays with your type of business, even if it's a one-person shop and you don't feel like you're running a true business. You are. Okay. Wait a second. Back to you.
Yeah, and in terms of when to start, I think sometimes it feels like, to Brian's point, like you need to have a certain amount of activity or something like that in order to justify tracking metrics. I think whatever you have that's in front of you right now is the best time to start. You'll always wish you would have started earlier than you have, because the more historical data you have, the more context and insight you can have. And the other thing about tracking metrics and looking at data and looking at your because really your firm, whether it's a solo or a small firm, it's a business. And so you want to be looking at these different trends. You want to be looking at these different metrics. The more you start looking at these metrics, the more you're going to ask questions that are going to lead you to make different decisions and try new things. It almost propels you to create business strategy just because you're tracking metrics. So it's kind of a way to get you into that strategic mindset, even if you don't have the time to sit down and, you know, like create a multi-page business strategy, which frankly is probably not that helpful. But I think tracking metrics will actually really gear you into thinking about things strategically and creatively for your practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for people who, again, I guess we'll say for people who are just getting started, there's this element of when you start to take yourself and your business more like take your business take your business seriously and think about it in a professional manner. You kind of, there's a mindset shift where you in a sense go pro, and I use that phrase because I actually read it from a book called the War of Art, and it talks about this person who is it the War of Art or Art of War of Art, I think is what it's called. But it's like literally this concept of if this person was a writer, and they started to take their writing professionally, like seriously, like sitting down every single day. And it was this concept of going pro, and it's a mindset shift. And the same thing happens when you start to do little things like tracking metrics, even though you're a one-person shop. You kind of go pro. You're like, okay, how are the metrics this month versus last month? How do I improve? How do I get to where I want to be? where do I want to be? What's the number, where I want to be, and how do I track that and improve on that, run tests, etc. We're going to get into that. But that's why I think this slide talking about when to start, like best time to start is now, if you want to take this business seriously.
And I think for smaller firms, the kind of three things that we identified as being important is efficiency, profitability, and opportunity. Those are like big buckets of questions that you can think about. And we can dive into some details on these. And these are just, in the next slide, we're just sort of putting some ideas out there. So you can, these are places for you to start, right? So efficiency is really like how well is your business working so far? So billable hours to non-billable hours ratio is a big one. Or you can try to break it up into different buckets, like how many hours are you spending in admin, how many in marketing, how much in billable work, or even networking, right? Or going to networking events, things like that. And then tracking, do you see a noticeable increase in demand following more time spent on marketing efforts? That's important to see. And like we talked about before, funnel metrics too. So your sales funnel, which is really looking at like, okay, these are all the people that I've engaged with, whether it's social media or networking or other opportunities. How many of those are actually and end up being clients? And figuring out how efficient is that funnel is really important too, because if you're spending 100 hours for every client that you get, right, the math probably doesn't work out for that. So those are really important things to figure out. And if you start to see, for example, that the funnel is much more efficient for marketing, where you can spend 30 minutes a week on LinkedIn and you get, however many qualified leads that turn into paying clients, well, great. Then you know that that's the place where you want to put the majority of your efforts. But if you're finding that actually networking is much more efficient, and if you spend an hour every week going to an event and you end up with really high quality contacts that end up converting into clients, then you know that that's the best place for you to put your time and effort. So that is one of the ways that funnel metrics are really helpful, is it really just helps you figure out, where do I spend my time so that I get the biggest return on my investment, which is really important at every stage, but especially when you're in the beginning, because there's so much to do and you don't want to be wasting your time doing things that are not going to be effective, especially when you're wearing so many different hats. And thinking about, conversion by channel is a great one. So if you're using different marketing channels, different social media, or if you're doing email marketing, you can see which of those are most effective. I think best practice at this point is you kind of have to figure out how to do them all at the same time, but it's good to know where your people are if you're noticing that you get more engagement on one of those than another. And I think response time is really important. People care about response time, so if you have a way to be able to track that, that can be really important, but that might be sort of a next step when you're working on customer satisfaction, things like that. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Brian.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, the concept of the funnel is an interesting one when you're small, but I think it has the same sort of implications, small or big. You should be, if you have a decent amount of data, you should figure out where the weak part, or like where the leaky part of your funnel is. So if you have a lot of engagement on social media, and you're not converting those to clients, what's breaking down? Are you not reaching out to people who engage with you? Is your pitch going sour, or just not getting a response that you thought it would? Are you having a difficult time closing at like the end of the funnel? Or is the leakage happening right at the beginning? Like, and why is that? So it's really important to identify the leaky part of the funnel. So that's an efficiency thing. And then I love the conversion by channel because it tells you where you should be spending your time. So if your best leads, one metric we actually don't have in here, and we actually do have it in the next one somewhat. but like the value basically of a customer. Different customers from different channels will have different value. So potentially will have different value or lifetime value, meaning they spend more with you, or they're honestly just better or worse customers. If your best customers come from referrals and those are the most likely to convert, you want to spend time thinking about how do you stimulate referrals more? How do you incentivize referrals? Not with money, but like how do you talk to old clients to get them to refer new clients, things like that. If your best customers come from social media, obviously lean in there, start to think about new content. And when I say best, it all has to do with like how efficient is that channel, is, from top of funnel to bottom of funnel. And the only way you know that, other than just like having it, in your brain, and having like mental math, is to start tracking this stuff in somewhat of a methodical way. And so yeah, that's what I would have to add there.
Great, thank you. And I think the next thing that we have here is profitability. As someone who's had run a business that is not profitable for time, and knowing how much stress that is, I just want to say before I go into this slide, when you're starting a business, like tracking profitability can feel like very overwhelming, one, and two, discouraging. So it's really important for you to know, but also just know that everybody, when they start a business, is looking at those trend lines and feeling a certain amount of discouragement, and that's completely normal. And in being able to track these other things, hopefully they will influence that profitability tracking that you're doing in a way that you will be able to see what is most profitable. That top line one, which is just total revenue minus expenses, that's almost you have the least control over that one, and that one's going to give you the most heartburn. So it's really digging into these other things and drilling down into other details is going to give you a lot more feeling of power and of being able to actually make some changes. So looking at things like average matter earnings, are some matter types more profitable than others? That'll help you prioritize the opportunities that are coming in the door. So if you know that you've got a couple different referrals on your plate right now, and one is significantly more profitable than the other, that's going to help you make strategic decisions that are going to impact that top metric in a way that's positive. And then also just looking at customer acquisition costs, which is really just, what are you spending? Whether you're, doing like Facebook ads or something like that, or whether it's just membership fees for networking or anything, lunches with people in your network. Whatever those costs are, even if it's your time, how much are you spending to acquire clients? That's going to help you see, okay, how much profit do I need from this client in order to make that acquisition cost make sense? So those are some important things. Hopefully you have an accountant or an accounting software that's helping you already figure some of this out. But obviously very important to growing any type of business.
Yeah, one thing I'll add on customer acquisition costs is it's a little bit abstract when you think about it in terms of time invested, but you can kind of do the math with your hourly rate. So if you're spending a lot of time on blog articles, or social media posts, things like that, or networking events, obviously your time is money, so kind of those things is expensive when you could be billing. So thinking about it in terms of that, it's a little bit more abstract, but I think the concept here is what does it take for to get a certain type of customer to convert, whether, and then you can also do that analysis by channel, so that you can identify where should your time be spent, where are you getting the most leverage for your time. So this one is, it's tougher to implement, but even thinking about it is helpful, as just a mental kind of concept as you think about growing.
Definitely agree. And then the other big bucket that we're looking at that metrics kind of help you understand is opportunity. So like I mentioned earlier, are there seasonal trends that help you preemptively staff up or make sure that you're not missing out on revenue? Other trends that you start to notice, like are you often getting referrals from other firms that aren't handling a specific type of matter? Can you build a practice around that? I have a business of law video series that I do. I was speaking to James Goodnow from Fenimore a few weeks ago, and he was talking about blue ocean strategy, which the idea of blue ocean strategy is that you basically find space that nobody else is working in, right? And then you kind of claim that space and make it yours, realizing there's a lot of opportunity there. So that may be something that you don't even necessarily need to be tracking in metrics. But maybe if you're just tracking the types of referrals that you're getting in, you start to notice those trends. And then just other, sort of trends within the industry, being able to take a look at metrics that other people are tracking. So I know like Clio puts out a legal trends report every year. And every year they add new metrics that they're tracking. But there's a lot of really helpful things in there. Like they're looking at things like how much revenue are law firms actually collecting and how quickly are they collecting it? Because that is really important, right? So how many outstanding bills do they have out there that are not getting paid? And how is that impacting small firms' ability to be able to function and to be able to grow if they don't have access to those funds, right? So I think there are a lot of really interesting legal trends and reports that are out there that you can reference. And I think Clio is a great one because it's specifically for small firms, and now like mid-sized firms a little bit too. But there's a lot of great metrics that you can be looking at that will help you think about the trends in your own practice, and how that might impact you.
Yeah, I love the blue ocean strategy. I call it zig when everyone zags, and
Yeah.
you kind of have to do it relentlessly and pick things that really line up with your unique blend of experiences, because we all are like, we don't all think of ourselves as in a niche, but we all have our niche. Mine might be more obvious just because I've been in like fintech and financial services for a while. But when I drilled down into that, also been in-house for a while, and I really leverage that when I have conversations with people. I talk about how, I am very used to being inside the machine, and I embed myself, and it's like work gets done without you asking me. So I talk more about my approach within my niche when I'm pitching myself. And that's kind of like I don't know, when I think about like, yeah, my blue ocean strategy, it's kind of doing that to the extreme so that there's not many people who can compete with me. And then I guess Peter Thiel it says competition's for losers. Same concept. It's like, don't go and compete with everybody. Find what you're uniquely good at or what you're uniquely positioned to take advantage of, and you can do that through trends, how trends avail themselves to you, how even the number one in this slide, sometimes lawyers know you for a certain thing, so they'll send work your way. Not a bad thing if you can find a way to do it and do it with energy and excitement, and that might be where you kind of stick your nose and grow your roots. But yeah, I don't know. I agree with all this stuff. I love it as a strategy. And Matt Curvis also chimed in and said his strategy is blue ocean strategy. I think he's been touting the subscription lawyer mantra for a long period of time.
Nice.
So I think we all kind of know that. But yeah, very cool.
Awesome. Do you want to go over the survey results from the group?
Yeah, I guess let's take a step back. I want to see if anyone has thoughts, if anything has popped into anyone's mind that they want to chime in and talk about with the topics that we've covered thus far. And then we can go into the survey results, and then we'll talk about tools for a little bit, and then and then maybe spend some time talking about specific metrics for each one of you. But yeah, any thoughts, I guess, regarding what we've gone over this far?
I would just highly recommend that folks check out the Blue Ocean books. I only listened to the most recent one, but I've read a lot of synopses and digests and stuff on the first, and it really helps capsulize for you why, like what it is and how to do it, because it's one thing to have a niche, but if you're a niche in a red ocean, you're not actually helping yourself, right? Um, I mean, you are helping yourself, but that's one way to go about it. And I'd actually say that's a counter strategy to blue ocean strategy, which is go swim in the blue ocean where there's like no competition and there's ample room for competition. And sometimes you want a little bit of competition in a blue ocean because it helps build awareness that this is a market too, because the fish might not swim to you, so you could eat them. You're the shark in the blue ocean. I mean, like it's a fun metaphor when you get into it. So it doesn't have to be that bloody. The red ocean concept is that it's a bloody ocean. So sharks are eating all the fish. The businesses are the sharks. That's the simple way to put it. But you might fish sometimes swim to the sharks, and they swim more towards the sharks when maybe there's more sharks there than just one. Anyway, it's a fun concept. I highly recommend all folks check it out.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I definitely have not read it, but will you drop the link into the chat? All right, let's go over the servers.
Pulling it up. I'll drop it in there.
Cool. So we had everybody fill out a survey. I probably didn't capture the latest signups, but this just gives you an idea of everybody who's on this call right now and how they answered certain questions that we asked before we did this presentation. So I think most people, 60% said metrics are most important to identify areas of growth and efficiency, but the counter to that is 64% don't track these metrics consistently. So obviously areas for improvement we're all kind of self-aware of. 20% of the respondents track billable versus non-billable hours. So at least getting a sense of how much you're working versus doing other related tasks that are not working, but working for clients versus doing related tasks to help build the business, whether that's marketing or admin. I think it's good to break down by buckets. So because marketing obviously is a different end goal than kind of like the back end stuff, and that will shift as more work comes in. And then in terms of sales funnel, 45% don't currently track sales funnel, but plan to start. An additional 29% don't have a consistent process. So again, a lot of opportunity there. So if you're wondering if you're behind the curve, possibly not, because a lot of people aren't doing that and are trying to figure it out. In terms of what people want to track, 40% say they're interested in knowing their lead to close rates. Another 40% aren't really sure what they want to track. I do think like lead to close is probably the most important thing. It's where you want to start, and I would challenge everybody to think about what their funnel is. So spend some time thinking about all the places where you interact with potential clients, or they interact with you or your material, and start to think about that as a funnel and making that funnel flow better, be stickier. Even if it means doing awkward things, like when someone likes a message, reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, I noticed you like this LinkedIn post." I don't know. It's not like, would you like to talk a little bit more about this, that, your business? I don't know what your practices are, what the message was about, but there are ways, I guess, to at least shoot your shot and see if there's improvements to be made in the funnel. It's just a good framework to think about how to capture more clients. Having said that, I struggle significantly doing all the things like that that are necessary. So it's always easier to teach than to practice, so to speak. So profitability, 65% understand their net profit, but other metrics are less understood, like average matter earnings, profitability by matter. Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to understand profitability when you're running a small shop. We're all kind of doing our basic bookkeeping and accounting. I think the average matter earnings and profitability by matter type are very important. Again, it tells you where to lean into and where maybe you should be spending less effort gaining, additional ground in terms of clients. So those are important. So if there's a way you can break those down, if you do have different matter types or you do have different channels, if you could break those down and then start to record what is your profitability and earnings for those, then it should be really helpful insights into where you should be spending your time on a marketing standpoint. And then challenges, 46% say we don't have enough data, or yeah, don't have enough data, or the challenge is setting up the right systems and making decisions based on data. And I think the next slide gets into some stuff around tools. But I would agree that's always, for me, the hardest part is actually creating a system or getting the right systems to track that stuff. And 61 said practice management software gives them the ability to track metrics, which we'll get into. But that's good. If we're all using some of the established players, then there are definitely ways to start tracking what your pipeline looks like, at least when people start seriously interacting with you. I think still there's a lot of room kind of before they hit your practice management software where you can be tracking your top of funnel. Oh, and I'll share this at the end. There's a link here to see all the survey results if you want. Cool. Catherine, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really expensive quote unquote business intelligence tools out there. I've looked at a lot of them, and I think one of the things that can kind of trip you up when you're getting started is it feels like you want to get your arms around everything all at once. But back to sort of the first slide where it was like, now is a good time to get started. I think the simplest way that you can get started and that feels most accessible to you is the best place to start. You might graduate to a point where you're tracking enough metrics and you have enough data that it's getting overwhelming and burdensome, and it's worth it to you to spend some money or time to put together a more complicated system. But I really think just making it as easy and accessible for you to do it consistently is the best option. And that might be exporting things from your practice management software if you have that option, and if it is tracking some of your metrics. Excel and Google Sheets, it might be all you need, really. You could honestly probably spend like 20 to 30 minutes on YouTube. If you don't have a lot of like Excel proficiency, there are some really good videos that can help you sort of get the basics down of setting different formulas and metric tracking sheets up, and then just keep it as simple as possible, really. And then once, yeah, absolutely, AI can really help with that now too. Just double check that it's telling you the right thing or spitting out the right information. But it actually is really good. If you're like, hey, can you put together a formula for me that tells me, what my customer acquisition costs are, if, these are the different data points that I have, it's pretty good at giving you a starting point there. So that's great. I do want to recommend, this is not obviously like paid advertising or anything like that. If you do get to the point where you want to put together a dashboard and you don't want to spend a ton of money, I have used something called Sife in the past. It's really reasonably priced. It does require a little bit of like coding in order to make it work. But if you can you could hire someone off of Upwork if you don't have the experience, or if you have like a niece or a nephew who can help with it. You can always, promise them something in return, a better Christmas gift or something like that. But it's a pretty like easy to use and inexpensive tool, and it's a really good middle ground between like just tracking things in an Excel spreadsheet and the incredibly expensive and complicated systems that are on the other end of the spectrum. So if you do sort of find yourself like Excel's not cutting it anymore, I need something that's a little bit more slick and I'm ready to graduate to something else, I would recommend that. But I really think anything that you feel comfortable doing consistently is really the best thing that to start with. I would not go too complicated too quickly because that will just make it less likely that you'll stick with it.
I guess I'll also chime in here. If you use a payment processor like Stripe or Confido Legal, like there's some great dashboard there, with the exception of old school real estate law in Illinois, where I am, where checks are still a thing, um, which is it's unbelievable, but whatever. Everybody gets a paper check at closing. All my revenue goes through Stripe. I mean, I willingly give up $3 to make 100, and so I could also recommend that if you're using some sort of payment processor, I haven't used LawPay. I got to imagine they have something there too that like help you at least with the financial metrics. Take a peek at that.
Yeah, that's great. We've used Stripe in the past too. It's really easy to use. It's great.
One plug, and this is something that I don't do, but I've thought about doing for a long time. So I'll just caveat it with that. There are more flexible CRMs that are super lightweight, that are more like, not, I guess, CRMs in the classic sense of like the practice management tools that maybe many of us use, but they're more truly like a relationship trackers and relationship management software essentially, where, and some of the newer ones are really good in that they know a lot of your interactions happen on social media or outside of kind of like email or your website and whatever portal you might have. One example of those is a company called Folk. I think the site is folk.app. Um, they have this really neat kind of like LinkedIn plugin that, if you do a search on LinkedIn, you can essentially just like import all of the people who are on your page, on your search results into your CRM. You can do, I think, the same thing for interactions on posts and things like that. So worth looking into some of the newer CRMs that are built more around the new age of like social media interactions and not the traditional kind of email and website interactions, or people filling out forms and stuff. Because what it helps you do is track that top of funnel stuff, the conversations you have outside of the internet, conversations you have on social media, and you can easily basically import contacts from any interaction that you have. Even if you did that on Excel, like literally, if on a day-to-day basis you just tracked all the people you interacted with, where they came from, and whether or not they're a potential client, et cetera. Obviously, these would be potential clients, but that starts to build that muscle of tracking kind of top of funnel stuff versus traditional kind of practice management tools that are really only going to start tracking once a person truly says, "Hey, I'm interested in your services," which is not the beginning of your funnel.
Yeah.
All right. We got some time left, and that's intentional. The goal, if people would be willing to, is maybe to get some participation um, from anyone who either wants to track a certain metric or is struggling to track a certain metric, and is just kind of looking for community input or input from Catherine or I, if we can help. I think it would just be good to hear whether who here is thinking about this today, and maybe this conversation has inspired you to track certain things, and you're trying to get it off the ground. So if anyone wants to chime in with like a metric you want to track, a metric you are tracking, and maybe we can kind of brainstorm how to improve that or how to get you started.
I'm curious to know if anyone is playing around with Notebook LM. because I have tried to like use that as a way to hack unstructured data to extract metrics from it. Like I am one of those people who brain dumps client notes into like a Google Workspace Google Doc, and also things like a follow-up list, like just in a Google Workspace Google Doc, right? And so now with like Notebook LM, I've been playing around with just you could connect if it's all Google and it's all protected. They have disclaimers that say this is your data. We don't train our Gemini model on this data. So I've been playing around with like querying against my multitudes of Google Docs. The only downside is like I have to opt in to connect it into a notebook. I wish it was a little more automated. But I found it's pretty good at like answering questions about like things like that I've brain dumped in there. So I can't say I've like found a good strategy of how to like get some actionable metrics from unstructured data leveraging this like RAG based AI like Google product. But it's got promising results. And like I've played around with it with like my podcast of like querying against multiple episodes. And like it's very finicky, like a lot of AI, like you have to ask a good prompt. But if like you ask a good prompt, it gives you some really good information, is what I've been able to find. It's just that when it's like super unstructured data, um, like getting the right queries in place to get the right information kind of a thing.
Interesting. I have a question. Do you know if you could, let's say you have a Google Calendar, or maybe you can download potentially like a CSV file of your calendar, or maybe like your last 2 months, right? And you can ask it to, I guess, extract all the contacts and try to classify them some way in terms of conversations you've had with really anybody. Like that becomes ultimately maybe a top of funnel data aggregation of sorts. Like, okay, who are all the people you've spoken with in the last 2 months, and who are they? And maybe you can use that to kind of seed some sort of funnel tracking.
That's a really good question. And I've never tried to connect a Google Sheet to it. So I just opened up Notebook LM, and that's not one of the options yet. It's just docs, slides, any website. So I mean, maybe you could hack it that way. I don't know. And YouTube, or just copy and paste text. So those are the only options available right now because it's originally designed as a research assistant. And so it's kind of hacking it to be like, I need you to be a research assistant on my Google Docs, Google Slides website or YouTube. And like I connected all the YouTube videos to my podcast. I was able to get that in there. But I wonder if you could like export your Google Sheet as a Google Doc, or like somehow connect it to a Google Doc and see how it does. That might be a way to work around it. But it doesn't natively integrate. But I have found Google Sheets, because I'm not in Excel, I'm in Google, like it has been suggesting like Gemini based prompts against it now. And so there might be something like just built into Sheets that lets you query against it with Gemini. I got to imagine Copilot has this option if you're in Microsoft and you have Excel. I know for a fact, because my wife has it for her corporate job, that like even in like PowerPoint, you could be like, here's this Excel, like make a PowerPoint with charts and graphs and data, and like Copilot will do that for you. So like that might be a way to like visualize your Excel, things like in a PowerPoint.
I wonder too if you created a very specific structure for your client notes going forward, knowing you were going to query it going forward. Obviously, I know that doesn't help you with your data in the past, but it could be really interesting if you kind of figured out a structure for your notes that you were keeping so that the unstructured data actually, is kind of giving you a really good basis for that in the future.
Right. Like maybe even putting in there, like, because I open up a new Google Doc with an intro call for every intro call that I take.
Yeah.
And like being in like actual like deadlines in the doc.
Yeah.
And saying follow up with this person on such and such a time frame or whatever, and like connecting all the intro calls, Google Docs, into a notebook. You could connect up to 50, and just saying like, give me a timeline and a to-do list or like of something to like follow up, and like it actually can make me like a checklist to follow kind of a thing. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Even if you have every intro call and you started out asking like, how did you hear about me? You know what I mean? Like you could do that instead of having a spreadsheet where you track,
Right.
top of funnel sort of.
Totally. Right, type it into the Google Doc. They found out about me from so and so, or
Exactly.
wherever, and then connect all those to a notebook. Hey, I want to know how, how many people found out about me.
Yeah.
Tell me all the different ways people found out about me, and track for me, and put a number next to if it was more than, if one thing
Create a
got
pie
something
chart
more.
for me, or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh, this is fun. Yes. I think it could do that. I don't know if it could create a pie chart in notebooks if it's there yet, but it could definitely categorize it for you and tell you how many. Yeah.
That would be really interesting. Yeah, I would love to. If you do that, I would love to hear more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for those who do use ChatGPT, that is like very multimodal, can do a lot of the things, ingest pretty much every different type of doc type. So there are definitely ways to take unstructured data, turn it into structured data, and then either keep it as structured data and use it, or ask it questions and stuff like that. But I think we're all kind of aware now of the capabilities of all that stuff. It's just getting crazier and better. On the topic, I guess, of tracking firm metrics, and I guess, is there anybody on the call who hasn't gotten started with any of it, and is sort of inspired to do that? Maybe somebody can talk a little bit about like what they think their first steps will be, whether or not this type of information is applicable. I also, one quick note, Catherine and I were talking about making this sort of like a recurring, ongoing quarterly touch point, so that we all can kind of use this as a forcing function to start tracking our practice metrics a little bit more thoroughly, and then potentially either reporting on them, or if that's not something that we all want to do, at least just talking openly about how the tracking process is going and how we're improving on our methodology. So this probably will become more of a quarterly thing where we'll build upon this framework, these and specific metric points, and talk about them, and challenges with them, and tools we've learned to use and stuff like that. So in the vein of keeping this as a community conversation. But back to my original question, curious to hear from anybody if anyone wants to chime in, and if not, no pressure.
I'll chime in. Hi, Jasmine. I mean, I just started my solo practice, less than 45 days ago. So everything is new. All metrics are brand new. So this is incredibly helpful on at least helping me avoid spinning my wheels on tracking things that are not going to be helpful. And I think for me, the biggest issue that I know I have is the sales funnel. I've been lucky thus far between having some core clients and then referrals, just having some similar solo small practitioners, taking conflicted matters from the larger law firm that I just came from, but developing that sales funnel other than those is going to be a challenge. I'm really bad with the follow-up. So this has been incredibly helpful in thinking about essentially it's a mindset shift for me on that funnel and how I need to think about every opportunity, and also tracking it in a way that's efficient. So I appreciate that conversation. I think that's going to be something that is going to be incredibly helpful. I also have Clio, so when it comes to the rest of the sales funnel, closing, consulting, all that good stuff throughout, that's already kind of being tracked. But having those interactions, treating every interaction like, even on LinkedIn, like it makes me feel a little bit like gross to be like, hey, I saw you like this, because we've all gotten the solicitations of like, hey, I see you make money, you should invest with me. But those folks actually, they shoot their shot, and every once in a while somebody doesn't block them. So I guess I just need to also take a similar mentality with that. I think there was also something, and I don't remember if it was here or somewhere else, of someone saying, instead of just saying I provide a service as an attorney, I'm a lawyer, it's I'm a member of this community let me somehow provide value as a member of the community. So, kind of shifting that mindset for me in that way as well, I think will be incredibly helpful. So, and I'm all for, these quarterly reminders of how we should be. And I think it's a great check-in too, to hear from other folks about what they're using, what's working for them, and then helping probably course correct for those of us who are inevitably going to stray over the next year or so, and trying to figure out what works best for them.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on starting your firm.
Thanks.
That's great. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think is so valuable about Hey Council, because I've been working with small and solo firms for a long time, and it can be really lonely, and it can be really difficult when you are, maybe you have like a niche practice and you're doing a really specific thing, and there's not a lot of other attorneys who are doing the exact same thing you are in the exact same space that you are, which is good to a certain extent, but then it can be really hard because who do you have to bounce ideas off of? And so it's great to have that you all have the space to be able to have that kind of sense of community and thinking about these things, because I think it does really help a lot.
One separate thing so bucking your question a little bit, Brian. I have not tracked really outside of my software anything, though I feel like I have a good sense just because of my practice. It's not like a high client volume practice. But question, if anyone who does track or has looked into this more has any creative ways about determining clients that don't become clients, why that was. So like sometimes I think it's obvious, and like I have had some where it's like very clearly it was price, even if they didn't explicitly say it, like there's enough context they've given me that I know that's what it was. But then there are just some people where you're like, oh, I don't really have a clear reason. And like, we've done the follow up and they're like, oh, I'm just waiting for XYZ. And you're like, okay, is it that or is it not? And so just like, if anyone has had any sort of creative ways or successful ways of getting people to kind of give you that information a little bit more, just because I know just like dealing with people, right? Like people don't want to disappoint a lot of times. So they're just like not going to tell you. So if anyone has anything that's worked for them, love to hear it.
Yeah, I'm curious if anyone else has. I think it's as tricky as a problem as you stated. I mean, even if you ask and get a response, you don't know if that's the true response. People are going to be nice and say, "Oh, I don't need services anymore," or like whatever data you get there is going to be somewhat skewed or biased, unless you have like a super transparent person. I don't know. It's a good question. I'm curious if anyone else has thought more deeply about it than I have.
I think, and just to add my own, I think the other, like one way that I've gotten it, but not because I necessarily have a great way of like soliciting this, but if it's like a referral, I have at least been successful sometimes in getting feedback from the person who is in between to say like, oh, this is what they thought, whether it's good or bad. So that's been helpful, but yeah, definitely don't have like, I don't have some magic email that's, turned people to tell me what their true thoughts were or anything like that.
So I do not like formally track this, but I do get a sense, generally speaking, of like when somebody doesn't sign up, the reason why, and it's never price. And I have more of a high volume practice than you do, because my prices are like literally the lowest that you could go. So it's definitely not price. I've lost some people because my firm is not a traditional law firm, and people think, oh well, I want a traditional law firm, right? So like Subscription Attorney LLC, like they're like, I want Joe Schmo and Jane Schmo PLLC, and like that's a reason why. I've literally been told that before. It's only happened a couple of times, and they're not my ideal client. And so I think really like what it comes down to in answering the question is like, who's your ideal client? And maybe they just weren't it. Maybe that's it. That's enough. Like if your market is anybody who's willing to pay me my expensive fee, then that's going to be, maybe it's because you're too expensive. If
Yep.
it's, I only work with business owners in the manufacturing space, and that wasn't somebody in the manufacturing space, but it was kind of close, but not really. I mean, there you go. Like, that's your reason. So I just say have like a really good, well-defined customer client avatar, or a few of them. And if they don't fall into one of those buckets, I mean, so like part of it is just qualifying clients on the front end. And I'm not a good example of that because mine is, are you in Illinois and do you have at least $20? Like, those are my qualifications, because it's $20 a month to subscribe, right? Is the starting price. So like I am not in that category of like, having to focus on that. But if you focus on that really well, then you won't even it won't even be a metric you need to track, because you're only getting inbound from your customer avatars, because all your marketing is around that.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think for me, a lot of mine is a referral practice. So, and it's interesting to me to find like some of the reason I want to track it is because like at least one of those was actually a target client, and I think it's and who I know pays those prices. So it's like refining, I think, at least on my end, like the way that I talk about it, or in this case, it was like probably an estimation error on my end. So I think it was like something within that conversation. But that's also partially like why it's interesting to me, because I want to also correct, like correct inaccuracies if they're people who are in target, but you're like, I think it was me, the way I said something, like trying to tease that part of it out. But totally get that some people just are not it, and that's also part of it as well.
I'm curious to know, did they explicitly say we're not going to hire you?
They did not, but basically did. Like it was, which was actually refreshing. They were like, this sounds too expensive. Like a lot of other people are like, oh, okay, let us, get back to you or whatever, and then just don't. They were like, this is too expensive. They didn't completely shut the door. And that's why I kind of asked the question, is like debating whether or not, like it's very clear they went a different direction on this particular deal, but I'm debating whether to reach back out and say, just wanted to follow up, if you're doing a deal in X size, like would love a shot for that, where the fees might be more appropriate or something like that.
Brian, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but I'm sure Brian's going to agree with me. Yes, reach out again. Yes, like absolutely. Like they said no. And if it really was price and you don't want to lower your price because you think that's what you're worth, then you don't lower your price. But it sounds like you kind of already have your answer, but it doesn't mean you can't follow up again and say, hey, I understand it sounded expensive at first. I just want to convey this is why it's valuable. This is why this is the value there. Was there any other reason and any other questions I could answer for you about why? I mean, at that point, there's no harm in asking, I think.
Yep. No, I think you're right. I accept the challenge of being a scaredy cat, and that I probably should do that.
I will also just chime in very briefly. It's not the exact same thing, but having tried to get feedback in a lot of different ways in the context that I have, in my experience, when people don't want to tell you to your face or over the phone, like they can struggle to be honest because of politeness in a direct human-to-human interaction. Sometimes the best way to get honest feedback is through an automated form. People will be a lot more honest that way. So you could build that into your process, where if somebody sort of like ghosts you or they give you like a soft no or something like that, and you're getting the feeling that you don't know why that's happening, you could literally just create a little Google form or something like that and shoot it to them. And sometimes assuming it's a no and putting that in your communication, like, hey, I'm sorry it didn't work out for us to work together this time. Would love your feedback on the interaction we had to improve our next engagement. Sometimes assuming it's a no will actually kick people into being a lot more assertive with you about what they want. So that's my feedback.
That makes sense. That's helpful.
I know we are a little bit over time, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for hanging on, and extra special thank you to Catherine for doing this. We will do this on a quarterly basis. We'll improve our own structure. I'll probably reach out to everybody to collect feedback and data so that we can improve, but definitely want to make this interactive, kind of like a good forcing function as Jasmine was talking about. Let's keep the momentum going here. But yeah, big thanks. Thank you all.
Thank
Happy
you all.
Wednesday.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. See you all soon. Bye.